Hello, this is Indo World Cup Daily coming to you from Place Plumerou in the middle of Tour City. Keane, we're going to talk about Ireland's opponents this weekend. Tonga didn't have a game last weekend, so this weekend's game against Ireland is their World Cup opener, and a few familiar faces in that Tonga squad.
They do indeed, Sinead. Tonga are one of the teams who've really benefited from World Rugby relaxing their eligibility laws, so it means that guys like Malakai Fekitoa, who's played for the All Blacks, are allowed play for Tonga. And I mean, Rory had a piece up online yesterday from his visit to Tongan camp, and you can hear how proud these guys are to play. And a guy like Fekitoa is going to be very familiar to a lot of Irish supporters, not just from his time with the All Blacks, but obviously with Munster last season. Took him a bit of time, I think, to get going. I think he spoke about at the time he had just had a kid and it was tough to get settled in Limerick, but
brilliant finish though.
Yeah, by the end he was a really, really important player, and it was almost unfortunate that when Munster were making their contract decisions, his form probably didn't justify doubling down on his hefty salary that he would have been on. So look, it was one of those things. Munster have got a couple of new players coming in, so they should be fine, and Fekitoa has gone off to Treviso, isn't it? So that'll be interesting. So they're going to be strong. You know what you're going to get without going down the cliched route of Tonga. They're going to have a physical pack, but they've guys like Charles Piutau as well, and there's a few doubts I think about his fitness, and he'll be very, very familiar to Ulster supporters of course as well. Was one of Ulster's best ever overseas signings, so they have a lot of quality. Israel Folau, the controversial Israel Folau, you'd have to say, didn't make the World Cup squad because he was injured, so he's a big loss as well. George Moala, very experienced player as well, he is suspended for the Ireland game too. But despite all that, they've got like Ben Taufania in the scrum. What's he, 148 kg I think. I mean, there's very few props that are bigger than that, so they are going to provide Ireland with very different tests I think than they had last week, certainly.
Yeah, and I was speaking to James Lowe after Ireland's win over Romania in Bordeaux last weekend, and he referenced how they kind of struggled a bit against Samoa in that warm-up game a few weeks ago, and he said they're going to have to be smart about how they approach Tonga this weekend.
Yeah, like that Samoa game was designed totally to prepare for what was to come against Tonga, and I think that brings about a little bit of pressure, because I think when Ireland's first choice players haven't been playing, I think we've seen a dip in standards. I mean, you saw last week when the first team is on board, when Johnny Sexton is playing, they're able to put these teams to the sword without any fuss at all. That wasn't the case against Samoa a few weeks ago. Now, Andy Farrell had decided to name his squad internally, and I think that had spooked a couple of guys, particularly for the ones who didn't make it. You can imagine that was very difficult to go out and play a game after being told that you weren't going to be in the World Cup squad. On the flip side, guys were told they were in the World Cup squad, and you wonder where they trying to almost think, God, I don't want to get injured here. The conditions were really poor as well, but there are no excuses, and this feels like the start now of Ireland's World Cup campaign. Like, hammering Romania is all well and good, but Ireland should be beating this Tongan team as well. They are one of the poorest of the Pacific Islands. Their form hasn't been great, Sinead. They come into it on back-to-back wins against Canada, but Canada are really poor. But if you go back a little bit further, they actually played Romania last November, and they were beaten by Romania. They've lost to Fiji, they've lost to Japan, they've lost to Samoa, so their form hasn't been great. And I think Samoa are a stronger team than this Fiji team or than this Tonga team are, but they are going to provide challenges. I mean, when you've guys like, if Piutau plays, Fekitoa, who's going to know plenty of these players, that gives them a good insight, I think, as well.
Yeah, no, it does indeed. I suppose the other kind of big game of this weekend is Australia against Fiji. Of course, Fiji beaten by Wales last weekend. They were in a tight corner. Australia beat Georgia. So this is a must-win for Fiji.
It really is. They did get two losing bonus points, which is good for them. But I mean, God, when you look at Wales, I think are going playing Portugal. Like, if Fiji had just had a kind of a softer game, and you think even mentally, I think is going to be a big challenge to pick themselves up to go again, because they had that high of winning at Twickenham, which was unbelievable. And you were kind of thinking, God, if they could just build on this now against Wales, like, things could really open up for them. And I know we've been discussing it on the podcast, but Fiji have become lots of people's second favourite team, and it's easy to see why with the way they play. So it's a huge game, and Australia were quietly good in their opener as well, so they've built a little bit of confidence as well. But it would be brilliant, I think, for the tournament from a neutral point of view if Fiji were to get back on track, because they just add so much to the tournament, don't they? They really do. They bring so much colour. They didn't have a huge amount of fans apart from the Man U neutrals who were at the match the other night that I were at, but there were a pocket of fans sitting next to the press box, and like the songs that they sing, and I'm sure people have seen the clips that have gone on in the team bus. They're just brilliant. Their culture is absolutely fantastic. It's one of those places where I really hope I get to visit at some point. Ireland were supposed to go there, if you remember, during the Lions tour, and COVID hit, and unfortunately they weren't able to get there, and that was really disappointing because I was hoping to get on that trip, but
another time, Keane.
Yeah, hopefully, because it's just like just love the culture and what they stand for, how much family means to them, and the songs and the colour and everything that they bring. So I'm really hoping that they are able to get back on track this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we will have another edition of The Left Wing coming up later with all the latest from the Ireland camp.